Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Theatre Thoughts podcast. We are going all the way over to New York to talk to two amazing podcasters who have actually, I've been on their podcast before, so I'm very happy for them to be on mine. We have, first of all, a born entertainer who has a lengthy history of helping productions obtain whatever they need, including but not limited to actors, funding, and behind-the-scenes labour, who holds a BFA in musical theatre performance from the University of Utah, and as well another performer, a person who works behind the scenes in the Great White Way, who attended the University of Utah in her early 20s, received a degree in the performing arts and design with an emphasis in wigs and makeup specifically. They've worked as a hairdresser on Broadway on works such as The Music Man, starring our very own Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster, Some Like It Hot, and Back to the Future. Please welcome Andrew Cortes and Hope Bird from the Stage Whisper podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having us. It's interesting to be in this position instead of the other way around. Like, I don't know how to feel about right now.
It's very weird, isn't it? Because I've done it the other way a couple of times, and I'm like, oh, I'm the guest. Oh, I'll just sit and like, yes, okay, let's talk about me.
But this is fun. This is exciting. Wow. It's great to be on your show. We're huge fans of the Theatre Thoughts podcast. So we're excited to be a part of your third season.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, third season. I'm doing a new thing where I kind of like bank the episodes, so it's like more of a time saving thing. So it's been really great to start this one. I'm trying to get a whole range of episodes out, so I'm really glad to have you guys on to talk about the Stage Whisper podcast. So I guess I could read out the bio, but I think it sounds better coming from the mouths of the creators themselves. So would you be able to give us a bit of an idea on what Stage Whisper podcast is all about?
Oh my goodness. Well,
everyone's been duped. We're actually a timeshare corporation.
No,
I'm kidding.
Don't scare the people, Andrew. No, Stage Whisper, we like to think of as kind of like the NPR of theater, non-biased information about what's happening on stages, mostly in New York, but really everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the 30-second sales pitch, as I've rehearsed numerous times, is basically we are a theater podcast founded by a husband and wife team. Wife, who you did a great job of introducing as a wig artist, myself, who's an actor and dresser. And our goal is to create a more inclusive, diverse, accepting, and educated theater community and audience. Our mission statement, we've stolen from Hello Dolly, which is money, pardon the expression, is a lot like manure. It's useless unless it's spread around helping young things grow.
And we don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, we haven't hit the lottery yet. I have to go buy another ticket for the Powerball.
But what we do have is a platform and microphones and a love for helping people share their stories.
Yeah. And we want to offer it up to as many theater artists and performers as we can, especially those in the off Broadway community who we feel don't have as many avenues to reach audiences, like larger, more Broadway, more commercial productions. We really want to just help our industry as a whole get back to not only where it was pre-pandemic, but better than it was before. And as Hope kind of mentioned, we've been referred to by a great guest that we're the NPR of theater podcasts, because we're not a critic show. We don't get paid enough to tell people what to think, let alone what we think. So we very much cherish that NPR comment. We're very much a show by artists for artists. And along with having guests on our show, the main purpose of our show, or part, is we actually talk about shows themselves for a lot of people who may or may not have an opportunity to see them. And we break them down, and we're hoping to make audiences more educated so that when they leave a show, they don't just walk out and go, oh, I didn't like that. Well, a lot of people have their hands in that show. Maybe you like 9 of the 10 things. There's that 10th thing that just didn't land. Let's figure that out.
And we also wanted it to be kind of a tool that, regional theater producers and directors can use as a source to get like an overview of shows, so that we're getting more diversity in local theaters, just because, it's hard to want to produce a show that you know nothing about.
And I think the other big point that we like to do in the conversation that we spur with our shows is talking about shows and their relevancy. especially now. There's been a lot of great theater we've had the privilege of witnessing and being a part of, but we're covering shows right now that were back in 2015, if I remember right, is where we've left off. That's 8 years ago. Are those shows that were being done 8 years ago still relevant? Are these stories still relevant? Is there a place for them to be told, or is there a better way to tell them? And that's one of the big questions we address, especially with the bigger conversation of diversifying the theater and whose stories are being told, and more importantly, accessibility. Who has access to the theater, and why don't they have access? These are bigger questions that we want to weave into our conversations, and not just tell stories about, oh my gosh, I met Brian Darcy James at this show. Yeah, that's great. But also, is Shrek still a relevant show? Of course it is. Absolutely.
Well, actually, speaking of that, I had the pleasure of seeing Oklahoma in the West End. Now, this is the revised one, which I personally had never seen Oklahoma in my entire life. I knew about it. I knew, Oklahoma. I knew that Hugh Jackman originated the revised production in the West End as well. But I was like, oh, it's like a real kind of American hoedown sort of musical. Not really my thing. So I went to see it because I heard a lot of good reviews about it. And I was like, you know what? I'll check it out. It looks interesting. And I went to see it, and I was gobsmacked at it. I was blown away because I felt like I was watching two performances. I was watching the actual Oklahoma and trying to figure out the original, and then also watching this revised version of it, which they completely flipped on its head. And I was like, that is how you make a musical that is outdated. I mean, there's literally that scene where the main character asks, like, one of the other guys who's meant to be the bad guy to hurt himself so that he can't be with this girl. And I'm like, what is going on right now? But the way they did it, I was like, this is dark, gritty, and also weirdly sexy at the same time. I was like, Rodgers and Hammerstein, what? And I was like, that is how you take a musical that's outdated and make it for now, for the contemporary stage. And I cannot stop thinking about it. It's been over like 2 months since I've seen it, and I still think about it every day. It's like my Roman Empire at the moment.
I have to ask you a question about that revival.
Yeah.
This is going to sound very weird, but were you hot at all during the show?
Well, I mean, it was a summer in the UK, but I was warm because they kept the lights on the entire time. Like, there was 2 instances of darkness, and then also with some of the, real sexual encounters with both leads characters, I was like, oh, this is quite sexy at the moment, and I don't know how to feel about it.
So I don't know if they did this with the West End production or not, but on the Broadway production, and it was interesting because she caught this. I just sweat like sitting around doing a crossword. It doesn't take much for me. But we saw this production, and when the second act started, they turned off the air.
Oh,
so all through the second act, it just kept getting hotter and hotter, and the tension was building and building. So I'm sitting here, you could feel the room getting more stuffy and uncomfortable. And when we left, Hope was like, did you notice that they turned the air off in Act 2? And I said, what do you mean? She's like, didn't you notice it was hotter? You're sweating.
And you also could hear that they cut the air, because the air went from being moving to being completely stagnant, which really added into the like that Act 2 dream ballet. Like the fact that the air was that stagnant, plus there was still the smell of the things they cooked during intermission and everything. I thought it was a brilliant choice.
I hadn't noticed it, but then like I look in hindsight and I was like, oh my gosh, that made that ending that much.
Oh, because it
was just such a smart
Oklahoma
move.
is meant to be, a like country town, and that's genius. I really froth. I love that stuff. When they do that. It's like when they waft in the smell of baked pies in Waitress. So you're like, I'm in a bakery.
That's also a dangerous show. I never left and was like, we should go straight home. I was always like, Boy, Junior's is just right around the corner, and I could go for some cheesecake. I mean,
Good choice. Cheesecake's a good choice. Well, I normally do. I was saying this before. I normally do my 1 minute theatre thoughts as the end segment of my podcast, but for season 3, I'm going to shove it in the beginning segment of the podcast because I'd love to unpack some of the answers that you create. So essentially, 1 minute theatre thoughts is 1 minute off the cuff, whatever comes to the top of your head, answers to a range of theatre questions. And then I'll go through and I'll unpack some of those answers and we can see where exactly they came from, if you're up for
all
it.
right.
Okay.
Like
cool.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll do like a 1-for-1. So I'll ask like one question and then Andrew or Hope, either or you can answer one, then one, and then we'll go second question, one, and so on. What has been your favourite production you've seen recently?
Back to the Future.
Good choice.
I don't remember what I saw last.
I mean, there's Fat Ham. There's...
Ooh, Fat Ham. That was a good one.
All right, I'm going to lock that in.
Or Sweeney.
Ooh, Sweeney. Okay. Name a show that left you speechless.
Go ahead.
1984.
Okay, 1984. Okay.
Ain't No Mo.
Ain't No Mo. Okay. What is a dream role or a show you'd love to tackle?
I personally would love to design a production of Shrek.
Ooh, okay.
So I'm going to answer both, dream role or production. Dream role, ironically, is Shrek. Production, I would love to tackle. Come From Away.
Ooh,
I love that
good
show.
one.
I'd love to work for that show. I
Good
would.
choice.
I'd work for days for that show.
All right, and then final question: which production would you most want to see come to Broadway?
Okay, I have to ask. Well, I guess it's coming to Broadway, so that doesn't count.
I
was
would
gonna say
like
The Wiz.
The Wiz. you
Yeah,
said?
but that's coming, so I lose that one.
So Atlantic Theater Company a couple of years ago actually just pre-pandemic did a musical of Secret Life of Bees. And I'd like to
Okay.
see that come to Broadway.
Right, excellent. Andrew, did you have one besides Louise?
Yeah,
It's a bit of a tough one for Broadway. When I ask
It
Australian
is.
people this, it's because we have so much limited, shows where you guys you have everything. So it's a bit of a tougher one.
I'm gonna cheat and give a two-parter. I want to see
Ooh.
Paradise Square back on Broadway, but I don't want that terrible producer to be involved. I think it was too short-lived. Or a show that just hasn't been on Broadway for so long that I want to see on. Damn Yankees.
Damn Yankees. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. All right. Well, let's go and unpack some of those answers. So let's get back to the first one. You said, what's been your favorite production you've seen recently? You said Back to the Future. So
Yes.
Great choice. First of all, Hope, obviously you are working on Back to the Future. So Andrew, what did you love so much about it? Because I, again, managed to see it on the West End. It was my number one I had to see. So once you share yours, I'll share mine.
Well, it's because my wife works for. No, I'm totally kidding. When I recommend this people, I have to start with this isn't nepotism. This is purely. So I'm a child of the '80s, and this is an iconic pop culture where they write the timelines out of the '80s. It's one of those marks on the timeline. This is when Back to the Future came out. This was just so huge. So when it was announced that the show was coming to Broadway, I already had doubts because I was like, listen, what does great in the UK doesn't always translate to Broadway, especially when they're just such iconic films. Case in point, Groundhog Day. So she got the job on it, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to support this. I'm anxious. And then when I went, from the word go, when you walk in, they've got the 80s music playing in the lobby. You get into the theater, just the way the stage comes off and into the theater itself. I was like, all right, I'm buying on this. My favorite thing, aside from all the illusions and the great songs and all our favorite moments in it, was the fact that the way the audience was reacting. The last time I heard such an excited and vocal and responsive audience was when I saw Six, and it was a bunch of teenage girls, or teenage age girls, kids, whatever, and I was like, these are audience members my age. These are, late 20s, 30s, 40s year olds. And then they also have their kids that they're like, this is mommy and daddy's or whatever. This is a big moment in our life. And I just thought the fact that this show excites that generation, the next generation of theater goers that we need to support theater, and is kind of acting like a hare in that it's cross generational. I was like, wow, this is not. It's not high art. It's not. I didn't leave the theater and go, I have to go write my opus, you know.
Yeah.
But I left really just like, that was a fantastic show. I was incredibly
Yeah.
entertained, and the level of execution of everyone's craft was so high. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter that it's a cult classic film. Everyone still
Mm.
came with their A game, and it was performed at the absolute best. And I've since been back to see it 4 other times. So I've seen it
Oh
5 times
wow.
now,
Oh
and it just
goodness.
keeps getting better and better and better. And I mean,
Yeah.
I know critics ripped it apart because they were like, "Oh, it's too cinematic. It's too much like the movie. There was nothing new." And all I could think is like, "Well,
But
yeah, you
like,
didn't have to
yeah.
reinvent the wheel on this one."
And I also think you would lose like a lot of audiences because Back to the Future is probably my favorite film. I love it. I've seen it that many times I can't even tell you. And so when I heard it was going to become a musical, at first I was like, "Oh, a movie musical, Back to the Future. Oh, how are they going to do the car?"
Right?
And so
Yeah.
that was the main thing I went in saying, "How the hell are they going to do this damn car?" Um, and then when Doc rolls up in it, and I'm just like, okay, that's how they do it. So they have the car, it's all visual, but then at the end, I mean, I don't want to spoil it for
Yeah,
anyone who hasn't
no
seen it,
spoilers here, but that is
but
just
that ending, I'm like, that did not see coming. And so
yeah.
that was my main draw, really. The music I could have like give or take sort of thing, but I was mainly going to see that. And I just love the story. I love, and I love that they lent into the, especially Doc. Doc plays this like the fact that Marty's got to seduce his mother in order to keep, his father and that together. And then Doc's just like, this is messed up. And so, I love that they played into that because it is weird. It's a weird thing. It's an 80s movie.
Yeah.
The relationship between Roger Bart and Casey Likes on stage is fantastic. The last show to play there,
Yeah.
which was Music Man, it reminded me of the chemistry between Sutton Foster and Hugh Jackman, and the fact that
Wow.
they could actively be playing during the show to make it fresh and new and fun. I can't remember how many times I saw Music Man, but every time my favorite scene was that library scene, because every time it was different. It was constantly watching the two of them try to get the other one to crack. And now with Back to the Future, you see that between Roger. Yes, Roger. I keep thinking it's Robert. Roger and Casey, you see them in these bits. Sometimes I go longer, sometimes I go shorter. Roger will add things from his past roles. So if they're like Easter eggs, and it just makes it,
Yeah.
you can tell that everyone is playing. It stays in the construct of where the show should be, but you can see everyone actively playing and making it fresh. And I'm like, that's the mark of a great show. And also to add to it, I'll give you a challenge because I found myself having to do this. I found
Okay.
myself in a slump where a lot of these new musicals I was seeing, one of the biggest issues is their opening number really fell flat.
Yeah.
So we had to like lift the audience and pull it up from this like low moment to get going, rather than being like what I think an opening number in a musical should be, which is like, I got you, I got your attention, now let's go,
Yeah.
And with this show, you don't really, I mean, you start with that great overture that's recognizable. Okay, cool, that's great.
Yes.
But the actual first number with cast members doesn't happen until after an iconic scene. So I'm like, all right, we're already up here. How do you can't drop us? I didn't think that opening number did in any way. I thought they did a really good job in keeping that going. So that was the first show for me so far of the new season that did that. And I was like, cool, high five, go team. Like you
team.
understood the
Love that.
assignment.
Yeah, you know it was happening. But then Hope, obviously you're working on that show as well. So is what's your experience been like backstage?
Oh my goodness. Well, first off, the company, like just the company members, cast, crew, everyone top to bottom is just a delight to work with. I haven't felt this big of a community in a real long time on a show. Because usually like hair and wardrobe, we interact with the actors, so we get to know them pretty well, but we maybe don't interact with the crew very much. But on this show, just because of how busy it is, how many changes there are, how widespread throughout the building all of those things need to take place, and how many crossovers between all the departments, we really are just one big like family. Like we know everyone, we see everyone, we know what everyone's going through. And so it's really kind of magical as far as a workplace setting. It's really cool like that. Um, and as a show, um, all I have to say is it is a beast of a show. There are so
Yeah.
many things involved in it. Um, and so it's a fun challenge. Like, as far as things go, like my department, we have 140 wigs in the show, and that is an
Wow.
insane amount of wigs.
Wow.
And so it's just it's silly. We kind of say every day, we're going in to slay the dragon because we want to create a beautiful, successful show, let everyone go on a journey. But you kind of have to like ramp yourself up to get in there. But then once you're in, you're like, this is the quest I wanted.
Yeah. I would love to just one day just be able to sit side stage of a major musical and just watch. Don't do anything, don't interact. I just want to sit and watch, just to see the quick changes, just to see the calls, just to see the stuff that people do side stage as well while they're waiting. That's one of my favorite things. So I've seen, so much theater, which I'm so grateful for. But there's a part of me, because I used to do performing as well. There's a part of me that knows what it's like backstage in a more community theater, lens. But to see it on a professional level, I would just love that so much.
Yeah, there's nothing like watching quick changes on Broadway. There's just something elevated about having every person a top member of their craft and just watching them work together, oftentimes without words. So yeah, it's. I hope you get to see it too because it's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's go to one of the other things you talked about. See, I said, ask for name a show that left you speechless. Now, what were your two answers? I've just completely gone out of my brain. One of them was something I'd never heard of before.
I said 1984.
I said
I did
No
see
Mo.
that. That was on Ain't No More. We'll talk about that in a sec. 'Cause I've never heard of it, but I did see 1984 on Broadway in 2017. I want to say.
Yeah, I think it was 2017, 2018, somewhere in there.
Yeah, with Olivia Wilde in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was she?
Is that
Who?
is that
Olivia
Yeah,
Wilde?
Olivia Wilde. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tom
Gobsmacked.
Hiddleston.
Was he?
I don't think
It wasn't
so.
in the one
think
I
you're
saw.
confusing.
My
I'm gonna
goodness.
let you go ahead and talk, and I'm gonna check while we talk.
So what left you so speechless about 1984?
Oh my goodness. Well, for one thing, the idea of successfully creating terror in a audience. I know that there's like Gothic theater and Grand Guignol theater and like theater that exists to scare, but I really didn't believe it was like possible to scare me like a movie, and it 100% did because
Can I jump in and tell the story?
no.
Oh.
So the level of
No, be
detail.
quiet.
I was like, no, you gotta let me tell this part. But the level of detail they went into to make sure that you as an audience member were uncomfortable, so that they actually use techniques from Big Brother they use them on the audience while viewing the story. So you are literally forced into the world of 1984, which is a scary freaking place.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah, okay, Andrew.
Okay.
You can tell.
Well, first of all, your viewers and listeners are getting kind of a ground floor on what would go into a regular Stage Whisper episode. This is a story of ours, so this is an exclusive. We haven't covered this show yet.
Oh,
So this was the first summer we went to New York to Broadway after I had a brain surgery, and as a result from that, I've got much stronger hearing now. And when you walk in the theater, they had this very low rumbly bass, and it put you on edge. Well, I was really hearing this thing, so I was white knuckling, like gripping the seat, because I was like, this is just pounding in my head. And throughout the show, they would also send out this really high frequency thing. So I would just be sitting there, and all of a sudden I'd be like, ah, and she'd be like, what's wrong? I'm like, I don't know, there's a tone, and it's like a knife in my head. And for the main allure to me to see the show was, well, while we were here, because we'd spend our summers out here at it sounds so Tony. We spend our summers we out here working and whatnot. But there was a New York Times article that was written up about fights that were breaking out at the show and audience members that were rushing the stage. And I thought,
I think I read something on that, and they were like, audiences are passing out in the aisles. And
yeah. And I thought this was just such a great advertisement by the show. Like, plant a fake article. Ha ha ha. It wasn't until the end when they get caught. Spoiler alert! If you don't know the story, I mean, I'm sorry, the book's been out, and everyone I feel like has to read it at school. But so they get caught and they get taken to the detention center. And by the way, it's Tom Sturridge and Reed Barney was who I was thinking of, because this exchange happens between the two of them. The entire stage gets like lifted off, and it's this giant white room, and the house lights come up. And we saw ushers, come out in the aisle, and then they were also in front of the stage. And I thought, oh, okay, like, again, part of the show. And Reed Barney and Tom Sturridge, Reed Barney playing like the correction guy. Tom Sturridge is the bad, the guy who's trying to escape Big Brother. He's explaining, like, sometimes people need to understand the truth is what's told to them, or something of that example. So he goes, if I tell you 2 + 2 is 5, what do you say? And Tom Sturridge's character goes, no. And he goes, you're not understanding. Fingernails. And the lights go out, and you hear Tom Sturridge screaming, and the lights come back on.
It's all coming back to me now. Yes, I remember this.
And the thing is, if you buy the script at this moment, Tom Sturridge's character has no lines.
Right.
So everything that's being said is improv. And so he's starting to plead with the audience to make it stop. You can make it stop. But yes, again, then he gets his teeth taken out.
Well, and here he is this whole time pleading to you, like looking audience members in the eyes, like, you need to stop this. And you believe that he's actually being tortured on stage, because up to this point, the script has made you question what reality was. In your mind, you start going, they could really be torturing him on stage, and I'm not doing anything to stop him.
Or maybe the point is for me to react like vocally and say stop, and then it really will stop. Because I mean, I'm with her. I was so uncomfortable, and of course the house lights are up, so you're no longer one person in the darkness just watching. They can see our face as much as we can see theirs, so we're as guilty as the person. And it left, and I could see why people were rushing the stage while people were passing. I got a little faint when they put the rat box on. I don't do rats.
Yeah,
so I was like,
that's right. Same. I remember that, and I was like, oh God, what am I watching?
So we left the theater and went to the stage door, and then afterwards, across the street is the play that goes wrong. And I said, "Oh no, do you think they'll let us buy a ticket for the second act? I need to just like cleanse my brain." But it was Monday, and the show was dark.
Right, there you go.
But, sorry, I had to get that story in. So you pick up where I left off. Sorry, dear.
No, but that's basically like just this idea that I like me, this person who's a connoisseur of theater, this person who supposedly has a university degree, I'm like, I was fooled into thinking that it was reality. And that's really hard to do. And I was just speechless.
No, I agree. Because, between us, we would have seen a ton of shows. So going there, you go, oh, it's all acting. It's just an act. I'm just going to sit here and be an audience member. But then you think of the regular Joe who comes in and go, oh, 1984, I remember reading that in high school. Let's go see it. Let's go Olivia Wilde. I know her. And so they go and watch it, and they would get that feeling like, holy shit, are they actually hurting this person? Like, let's do something. So that's fascinating. It's all coming back to me. I must have blanked it out if I've been so traumatic.
Don't be mad about it. It was a great show, but one I'm like, not good.
There's a style of theater. I can't remember what it's called. I was about to Google it, but it is that to make you uncomfortable and to make you feel uncomfortable. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a theater of the something. But I'm sure it will come to me at some stage. But that's great. So the other one, before I take a quick ad break, I want to just ask, you both said that you'd love to work on Shrek. So what is it about Shrek that captivates you so much?
Brian Darcy James. No, I'm kidding.
Honestly,
the man.
He is.
Honestly, for me, it's an anti-hero fairy tale that can be as real or as whimsical as you'd like. And the characters are real, yet Yeah, a fairy tale. And I just love living with one foot in reality and one foot in the fantasy realm.
Mm. Yeah.
So for me, it's 3 points. The first is it's Jeannie Tesori. I love Jeannie Tesori to the end of the earth and back. No two shows of hers sound this anywhere close to being the same. The second is the fact that it accepted what it was as, again, not high art. It's just there to entertain, tell a story. This is what we are. But at the same time, knowing what league it was being performed in on Broadway, it went a step further and was like, well, we know who we are. We're going to throw rocks at other people while we're at it and make fun of other people. And, we can have fun at that because we can make fun of ourselves too. So they made great jokes about other great shows like A Chorus Line and Wicked and Lion King. And I was like, that's incredible to do when you're a new musical.
Right. Well, because you should take your work seriously, but never yourself. And Shrek does that.
And
perfectly.
then my final reason is as a lot to love, as a larger than charge, chunky yet funky actor, Shrek is an ideal role. And I didn't think about that for the longest time until my dear wife here, my junior year of college, going to my junior year, said, you should really look at some of the songs from Shrek. I think they'd be perfect for you. Well, they happen to be not only perfect, they're perfect in my range, perfect for my character, and they've led to a lot of success. I just have a lot of fun with that role. So it's a dream role to play it on Broadway, maybe someday, because it's just so fun. And Brian Darcy James.
Brian Darcy James. So I'd love to play Farquaad. I think I love those like real the villain sort of quirky character driven roles. Those are my sort of thing. I love those. So I'd love to play Farquaad.
Make sure you have strong knees. That's all I've heard. As long as you got strong knees, you'll be fine.
Yeah, you need strong knees, knee pads, and go for it. Excellent. All right, well, I'm going to take a quick ad break.